Hello friends, so today we're going to discuss the features of object-oriented programming. So let's continue. The main features of object-oriented programming includes abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Polymorphism. Though these terms appears to be jargons to you right now, but we're going to discuss them one by one. So let's start. Before starting any of these terms, let me take you to an example. As we have seen, everyone uses a television in their lives, and when we want to operate a television, we use a remote. But we don't know how the coding and the circuits work in the remote. We only know how to use the buttons, and thus using only the buttons we operate the television. So that is the first term which help us to know abstraction. Abstraction means only displaying the essential features and information and hiding the details. So as you can see, while operating a TV, we and using a remote, we are only seeing the essential features such that how to increase the volume, decrease the volume, change the channel. We don't need to know the details of how does the signal is sent through the remote and how does the circuit works. So this is the first feature of object-oriented programming, such that if you are using this type of code and object-oriented programming, abstraction feature enable us to only display the essential features and information and hide the details. Also, this prevents the user to go into complexity of code and working. So this will not allow the user to go into the complexity of the codes and the working of the circuit. It is the way to implement the essential features without including the background details. So what does this help? It helps to implement the essential features only in the remote. We only put the essential features, not irrelevant features in the remote, without including the background details. What is running inside the remote? Uh, we are not bothering about what is done inside the remote. We are only bothered about how the channel changes. So that's the first term. Now moving on to the second term, which means encapsulation. So as you can see, the remote encapsulate all the features which we want to do with the television. It encapsulate means it acts as a wrapper of all the functions we want to do. So that's the second feature of object oriented programming, such that it wraps. Encapsulation means wrapping up of the data and information into a single unit. So what this is help is, so if you want to, let's say, use some object, and that object when you create encapsulate all the essential related data and functions regarding that object, such that we don't need to search for new functions in the whole code or database. Encapsulation is defined. This is the definition of encapsulation, which defines as binding together the data and function that manipulates them. So we are binding together, which means we are wrapping together the data and the functions that manipulate them. The functions which manipulate the data and the data itself is encapsulated as a whole in the objects. It is a wrapper which prevents the code and the data from being accessed by any of the other defined outside the wrapper. So what does this help is, we are not allowed to access this code outside. All these information, this data, these functions are all encapsulated inside the wrapper, such that we are not using it outside this wrapper. If you want to use these functions and these data, you want to initialize this object. And that's the second feature of object oriented programming. The third feature states the name is polymorphism. Polymorphism represents a process of using a function more than for one purpose. So I will give you an example of a mobile phone. So when you are using a mobile phone, you use mobile phone for multiple purposes, for calling, for texting, and like for watching movies, and so on and so forth. As you can see, this is also one more example. A person at the same time can have different characteristics. Like a man at the same time is a father, a husband, an employee. So as you can see, the same person can act differently and have different characteristics, but the person remains the same. That's the beauty of object-oriented programming. Polymorphism comes handy because it represents a process of using a function for one purposes. So you can write a function and it can be used for multiple purposes for multiple times, and thus you only write once. And the last but not the least property or feature of object oriented programming includes inheritance. So what does this is the very simple, you can understand it from the term itself. You can inherit properties from parent to the child, or the child inherit properties from its parent. So what does this mean? As you can see, let's say you buy a phone today, and now let's say a new featured phone comes after that. So do you think all the properties of the new phones are different? Does the new phone not include calling? No, no. So what does this mean is the new phone inherits most of the properties from its parent. Parent means the original phone. So if there are two phones, the second phone inherits properties from the original parent, and thus the children will include new properties along with some of the old properties from its parents. So that term is called inheritance. Inheritance actually help us to reduce the time to write code. How does this help? So we will first move to a definition. It is the property of a class to derive properties and characteristics from another class. It's called inheritance. So you derive properties from another class. Class is just a group of objects, related objects. So let's say there is a class of mobile phones. So all mobile phones inherit properties from this mobile class, because all of them will include some features such as calling, texting, and watching movies. But we will not write code for each an object every time. We can write them in the class, and when the object calls the class, it inherit all the properties from it. And thus, this property help us to create new classes from the existing classes. From the existing classes, you can create new classes by adding more properties to the new class. It helps in code reusability, such that the code is reused for multiple times for making new objects, and the code is not repeated again. The same code which is used in the parent can be also used in the children. Also, the changes done in the original parent class are reflected in all the inherited class. Because let's say there is a code for adding, or there is a code for calling to a person. If we change the calling feature in the original parent, then it will be changed in the, because the child has inherited the same function or the same method from the parent. If there is a change in the parent, the child is just copying or just reusing the same code. So if the code changes, the same code will be reflected changed in the children. I hope you understand all the four features of object oriented programming. If you like this explanation, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.